Ryan had never spent $45,000 on anything in his life. Not on a vacation, not on furniture, not on a watch, not on a hobby. But somehow, he convinced himself to spend it on a car. The monthly payment was only $689. It felt affordable, responsible, even. 5 years later, Ryan realized that decision had quietly cost him far more than he ever imagined. And he wasn't alone. Every year, millions of Americans sign car loans they believe they can comfortably afford. Yet many of those same people struggle to build wealth. They're making decent money, working hard, doing all the right things. So why do so many people feel financially stuck? How can something as normal as a car payment become one of the biggest wealth killers in modern America? If you've ever looked at a monthly payment and thought, that doesn't seem too bad, this video might completely change the way you think about money. Because the car payment trap isn't really about cars. It's about how we make financial decisions. And once you see it, you'll notice it everywhere. Ryan was 29 years old when he decided it was finally time for an upgrade. His old sedan had over 150,000 miles on it. The paint was fading, the technology felt outdated, and honestly, he was tired of driving it. At first, Ryan told himself he wanted something practical, reliable, reasonably priced, maybe somewhere around $25,000. But then he walked into a dealership, and that's where everything changed. The salesperson showed him a newer model, then a nicer model, then an even nicer model. Before long, Ryan was sitting inside a beautiful SUV with leather seats, a panoramic sunroof, a premium sound system, and every feature imaginable. The price tag said $45,000. Ryan immediately thought it was too expensive, but then something interesting happened. The salesperson didn't talk about the price. He talked about the payment. How much are you comfortable paying each month? It's a simple question, but it completely changes how people think. Suddenly, Ryan wasn't comparing $25,000 versus $45,000. He was comparing $450 per month versus $689 per month, and somehow the difference didn't feel that big. That's the first trap. Most people think they're buying a car. What they're actually buying is a monthly payment, and those are two very different things. Human beings are surprisingly bad at understanding large numbers. $45,000 sounds enormous. $689 sounds manageable. One number feels scary, the other feels familiar. This isn't an accident. The entire auto industry understands this psychology. That's why almost every car advertisement focuses on monthly payments. Not total cost, not interest, not depreciation. Monthly payments, because payments make expensive things feel affordable. And affordable things are easier to say yes to. But here's what's fascinating. Cars weren't always sold this way. Decades ago, most buyers focused heavily on purchase price. Loan terms were shorter, financing options were more limited. People asked one simple question: how much does it cost? Today, the question is completely different. How much is the payment? And that shift has quietly changed everything. Over the last few decades, loan terms have gotten longer and longer. 5-year loans became normal, then 6-year loans, then 7-year loans. Today, it's common to see 72-month and even 84-month financing. Why? Because longer loans reduce monthly payments, and lower payments help people justify larger purchases. Imagine a $30,000 vehicle. Now imagine stretching the loan long enough that the monthly payment looks similar to a much more expensive vehicle. Suddenly people start shopping for payments instead of prices, and that's exactly what happened to Ryan. The SUV felt affordable because he wasn't evaluating the price. He was evaluating the payment, and those aren't the same thing. Let's look at what Ryan's decision actually cost. His monthly payment was $689. Over 5 years, that's more than $41,000. But that's only the beginning. He also made a down payment. He paid sales tax, registration fees, insurance, routine maintenance, tires, repairs, fuel, interest. When everything was added together, the actual cost of owning the vehicle was much closer to $60,000 than $45,000. Most people stop there. They think the lesson is that cars are expensive, but that's not the real lesson. The real lesson is much bigger, because the biggest cost never appears on a bill. It's invisible. Economists call it opportunity cost, and it's one of the most important concepts in personal finance. Opportunity cost is what you give up when you choose one thing over another. When Ryan committed to a $689 payment, he wasn't just spending money, he was giving up every alternative use for that money. Let's imagine Ryan invested that same amount instead. Nothing complicated, just a simple index fund. Every month, $689 goes into investments rather than a car payment, month after month, year after year. Now something interesting starts happening. The money begins generating returns. Those returns begin generating their own returns, and eventually compounding takes over. Most people underestimate how powerful this process is. A few $100s per month doesn't seem life-changing, but over decades, it becomes enormous, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars, possibly more, and that's the hidden cost of the payment. The SUV didn't just cost Ryan money, it delayed wealth, it delayed freedom, it delayed options, and that's what makes the trap so dangerous, because nobody feels the cost immediately. The pain is pushed into the future. The payment feels manageable today, the consequences arrive years later. Now here's where things get even more interesting. The car payment itself isn't usually the problem. The real problem is what happens next. People rarely stop at one payment. First comes the car, then comes the upgraded apartment, then the furniture financing, then the new phone, then the subscriptions, then the vacation finance on a credit card. Each payment seems reasonable on its own, but together, they begin consuming future income. Before long, people aren't spending today's money. They're spending money they haven't even earned yet. And that's a dangerous place to be, because every payment reduces flexibility. Every payment reduces options. Every payment creates obligations. That's why high-income earners often feel broke. It's not always because they spend recklessly. It's because they've committed so much of their future income that they no longer have room to breathe. A raise comes in, the payment expands. A bonus arrives, the lifestyle expands. The cycle continues. This is where wealthy people tend to think differently. Most people ask, what can I afford each month? Wealthy people often ask, what is the total cost? Those questions lead to very different decisions. One focuses on consumption, the other focuses on trade-offs. One focuses on immediate comfort, the other focuses on long-term freedom. That's why you'll often see financially successful people driving surprisingly ordinary cars, not because they can't afford something nicer, because they understand what that money could become if invested instead. They understand that every dollar has a job, and once a dollar is spent, it can no longer work for you. Now, none of this means you should never buy a nice car. That's not the lesson. The lesson is awareness. If you want the nicer car, buy it. Just understand the trade-off. Understand the true cost, understand the opportunity cost, and understand what you're giving up in exchange, because once you see the math clearly, you're making a conscious decision instead of an emotional one. Ryan eventually paid off his SUV, and he enjoyed driving it. But years later, he realized something important. The dealership never sold him a $45,000 vehicle. They sold him a $689 monthly payment, and those two things are not the same, because payments make expensive things feel affordable. But affordability and wealth are not the same thing. The car payment trap isn't really about cars. It's about how easily we trade future freedom for present comfort. And the people who build wealth learn to recognize that trade-off before they sign the paperwork. Before you go, I want to ask you something. What's the biggest monthly payment you've ever committed to? And looking back now, was it worth it? Let me know in the comments below.